Ryan Ralph, the man, is the suspect that was believed he was going to try to assassinate the former president at his golf course on Sunday. According to this news story, he deteriorated from a successful roofer to a man who thought the IRS was sending the cops after him, according to a retired officer who had more than 100 interactions with this guy. He was arrested in Guilford County, North Carolina, and spans between 1980s and 2010. His charges ranged from writing multiple bad checks to felony firearm possession, possession of stolen vehicles, and multiple counts of possession of a weapon of mass destruction. In 2002, specifically, a binary explosive with a 10-inch detonation cord and a blasting cap. So I don't know. This is where, in my opinion, the conversation begins for all of us. The conversation about, all right, so what should we have known about this guy? And what I mean by that is I've grown up around people that are odd. I had an uncle that was very strange, but I don't know, and he's passed away now, so I don't feel guilty talking about it. It doesn't matter to him anymore. But my uncle was odd, and I don't know that he was ever officially diagnosed as schizophrenic, but he exhibited all of those things, and he would talk to himself, and he scared the heck out of my mom, and we had moved to Florida, and he stayed living in my grandparents' house in Northeast Ohio, and the neighbors that we were still close friends with. Matter of fact, we're still friends with the neighbor across the street. They still live in the same house that they lived in the 1970s when I lived there. And she would tell my mother in phone calls that my uncle was getting weirder and weirder, and he would sit in his garage at night in the dark, sit in a lawn chair in his garage. He smoked cigarettes. He smoked Camels, unfiltered Camel cigarettes. And he would sit in the garage, and you could only see the orange glow from the cigarette, and he would carry on conversations with people. He would laugh out loud and carry on conversations. Kids wouldn't go near the house for Halloween. People were afraid of him. Now, I don't know that he ever committed an act of violence, but he scared my mother one time so much that we were told if we ever saw him in Florida that we were to lock the door, not let him in, and call the police. So what should have been done about my uncle? Anything? I wrestle with these. My uncle was just somebody that had issues. And so should we take mental illness and criminalize it? That sounds horrific, doesn't it? On the other hand, if somebody is exhibiting dangerous behavior, what do you do? Now let's go to the other argument that this is bringing out for everyone. And it's the argument of free speech. I come on the air. I defend my positions. I tell you what I believe and what I don't believe. People agree and people disagree. I'll give you one of the controversial ones. I don't believe the election was stolen. I'm a Republican in Arizona that has been very outspoken in saying that we shouldn't be talking about stolen elections, that we should be moving on, that I don't believe, although I don't think anything is 100% secure, I certainly don't think there was any intentionality in stealing the election. That's what I believe. Controversial. I've had Republicans angry at me for saying that, think I'm dismayed that I don't believe the truth in their eyes. So let me ask you that question. Who's telling the truth? I believe I am. They believe they are. Does that make me a liar? Am I lying? Or am I wrong? Are they lying or are they wrong? Should one side not be able to speak or the other? Is what I'm spewing misinformation? Is what they're spewing misinformation? I ask that question because Governor Walz, I want you to listen. This guy could be the vice president of the United States.
I think we need to push back on this. There's no guarantee to free speech on misinformation or hate speech, and especially around our democracy.
There's a difference between making threats, and there have been multiple people arrested for making threats against public officials. You know, I've talked about my friendship and my admiration for Clint Hickman. Clint Hickman is leaving the County Board of Supervisors. His family-owned business has been a great family business. They are charitable, they are giving, they are kind, they are good examples, they're good citizens and good people. His name has been dragged through the mud with election integrity nonsense, in my opinion. And even if you believe elections are stolen, the man's life was threatened. Over 100 people were outside of his home threatening him. That's unacceptable. That is a threat. That is an arrestable offense. Somebody has been arrested and convicted and imprisoned because of those threats. That's different than somebody saying, I think Clinton Hick, and I fought back. But someone has a right to their opinion and say, I don't like him. I think he's a bad guy. I don't think he should be on the board of supervisors. You have every right to say that. Not according to Governor Walz. According to Governor Walz, if I don't agree with what you say, it's misinformation. The stark example is you look at what was said about COVID. You look at the things that were said about ivermectin and hydroxychloroquine. Those two things. You go back and look what was said about anyone who dared say that those were reasonable treatments for COVID. They were called killers. You are going to kill people saying stuff like that. The blood of other people's blood is on your hands for saying such a thing. If you told people not to get the vaccine, you should be put in prison. And then what happened slowly but surely and very quietly, the government has acknowledged that ivermectin and hydroxychloroquine were actually acceptable treatments. And again, I'm someone that got vaccinated. I got vaccinated. But my point is, can you imagine if Governor Walz and his interpretation of misinformation was the accepted way we behaved? It's the reason why I believe the founders of this country created the First Amendment and made it the First Amendment. Because there are going to be things that you say that I guess this is the question. Do you really believe that in other countries that you don't have the freedom of speech, it's ever sold as a bad thing? You don't think that in nations where you can't speak freely, they say to the people, it's because we don't want to hear what you have to say? No, they say, we just don't want you spreading lies. We want you to only tell the truth. You confuse people when you say those things because that's just not true. And so when you say it, you put people in danger. And we can't have dangerous speech because we don't want people to die because you're saying irresponsible things. Therefore, you can't say that anymore. And if you do, we're going to lock you up in the interest of saving other people's lives. Does that sound familiar? Sounds very familiar to me. Very familiar. I don't agree with a lot. I push back and argue about a lot. But I'll defend your right to be wrong. I'll defend your right to speak freely.
Thanks for watching The Mike Broomhead Show. Tap to watch the first season of Amazing Arizonans, a KTAR News podcast. You can also click the button in the middle to subscribe.